Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to Swipe in the City. It's Marie.
And you've got Michelle here in the studio today.
And, before we get into it, Michelle, what's going on? We just had Thanksgiving.
We did. We had a wonderful Thanksgiving. My mom had the idea of my brother and I going out to a nice dinner instead of trying to do, the cooking and the prep and the cleaning and all
Classic
that.
Daniela Hannah.
And so she made reservations for us, and we had a couple extra seats. So Marie and our friend Lindsay got to join, and I was in heaven. I was like, I've got my people here. There's nice music playing. This cocktail tastes real good. It was pretty awesome. I loved it.
I have to say, I was thinking about this morning, actually. Because I'm not a fan of Thanksgiving food, as you and I have discussed. I don't know that we've talked about it on the show, but I fucking hate turkey. And I was thinking about it, and I'm like, no offense to every other Thanksgiving meal that's ever been prepared for me, but Eddie V's was by far the best one, hands down.
So fucking good. I got it.
Worth the money.
Yeah, worth every dollar. Well, and our friend Lindsay was like, why don't we come here more? And then it was like, oh, okay.
Then we got the bill.
Yes. But, I got a bacon wrapped filet that had lobster on top. So bouge and so freaking good. I'm sad I didn't take more of it with me.
And I'm just sad we couldn't make out after because I'm allergic.
Yeah, there was no Thanksgiving kiss at midnight.
That's the new thing, guys. I don't know if you've heard.
Yeah, the new thing is that you kiss at midnight before you roll over in your sweatpants and pass out for 12 hours.
And go into a food coma, yeah. No, it was great, though, and now here we are in the holiday season. I'm not feeling, to just bring the topic in here, I'm not feeling nearly as cynical as I usually do come the holidays.
Okay, that's good. Why do you think that is?
Well, I was listening to Evermore this morning.
For those of y'all who missed it on our story, the Betches reel of where he's the friend who listens to Taylor Swift nonstop and the other friend. We're about to reenact that, but it's just live.
Pretty much. So it's raining. It's disgusting out this morning, but it's also lovely. So instead of going on my morning Starbucks walk with Luna, I went to Starbucks in my car because it was pouring rain, and then proceeded to just go on a random drive down, I went down 360.
Okay.
Which is a really pretty drive, period. When there's no traffic and when it's raining. So it was lovely, and I just listened to Evermore, and tis the damn season. So I've got my mini Christmas tree, and I've got my menorah up. I'm ready to go home. My last road trip from Austin to Florida for Christmas. I'm ready.
You're ready. I love that. I'm not quite ready for Christmas yet, but this year is going to be super different for me. And maybe we don't want to get into the holidays too much since we will have an episode coming. But so we'll talk about that more maybe on the next episode. But no, I think that we've both got some really exciting things going on in our professional lives and our days outside of the podcast. And I feel like at least this week in particular for me, having an extra couple of days off has been a game changer. I just feel like I'm in a really good headspace. I'm gonna deep clean my apartment today because it looks like a frat boy's been hanging out in there.
Well,
I'm the frat boy.
Yeah, let's be real, Michelle.
It's me. But yeah, no, I think it's kind of funny because we're going into this episode, but we're both in a pretty positive headspace.
Oh yeah, we're feeling great, which I think is just gonna make it a little I don't know, maybe a little feistier.
I like that. But we are going to kind of talk about cynicism and
realism, right? Where do we draw the line between being having realistic expectations about a partner, about a first date, and where does that line get crossed to where you're like literally just jaded?
Yeah, and this is something that I think is pretty interesting because I consider myself to be a realist, and sometimes probably I feel like I probably flirt with the line of cynicism a lot without like consciously realizing it. Like,
I think we both do.
Like, I'm just being realistic. It's like, well, no, I need to maybe sometimes have a little more hope, you know, even though I know what's going to happen. Maybe it comes from working in sales too, though. Like, we're just used to getting ghosted and rejected.
That's true. We do still need to do a whole episode on like the sales cycle of dating. We do. We need to get Mike, the producer, back in for that.
That would, yeah, he would be a really good one for that since he like actually manages sales teams.
Yeah.
But yeah, so looking at, did we pull up like a definition of cynicism?
We don't have like an actual definition, I guess, but we can. An inclination to believe that people are motivated purely by self-interest. Skepticism. I can't say I've ever thought of skepticism as being a synonym for cynicism.
I can kind of see it because, like, if you apply it to dating, right? If you have kind of a cynical point of view and you're getting ready to go on a first date, you might just be, like, skeptical about even going, what, like what this is saying, like, what their intentions are. You might be, you're going in with kind of like a preconceived notion that things probably won't go well, or it's unlikely that things will go well.
I was about to say, well, I mean, looking at the odds. Oh yeah. Whoops.
and that's where, like, again, the realism versus cynicism is really interesting.
This is okay. So the Urban Dictionary definition of cynical: someone who always expects the worst and most selfish motives out of everyone and everything, otherwise known as experienced. Whoa.
That's funny.
I feel attacked.
Yeah. So I think some of the difference is the way that you're approaching it. So if you're cynical, you might be going into a Hinge date and you're like, I'm so fucking sick of every guy I've met on Hinge. They're all the same. They're all this. They're all going to ghost me, whatever. So you go into it with that, like, negative frame of mind. Whereas, in my opinion, realism, you go into it and you're like, this might not work out, but I'm going to go into this knowing that, like, the reality is I'm probably not going to meet my husband today. But I'm going to go into it and know that, like, they could be a cool person or something could come from it. I think being a realist, like, you have expectations from experience and you have that knowledge from experience, but you're still going into it with, like, a positive mindset.
Yeah, I feel like I think about it like, okay, I'm going to go on this date and this guy could be super dope. He could be a dick. Like, he could be whatever, but at the end of the day, like, whether this goes anywhere or not, like, I'm gonna be okay. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like I've at least learned to adapt that attitude, because I feel like when I was younger and a little bit more bright-eyed and bushy-tailed in my early 20s dating, like, and actually, honestly, like, I feel like I've always been a bit cynical, but like, when I was more excited and optimistic, I was also like, well, if this doesn't go well, it could be the end of the world. And that's not healthy.
Yeah, I think it's like the more excited and the higher your hopes are, which is like sometimes getting outside of being a little more realistic about what to expect out of a first date. So the higher your hopes are, the, like, greater the fall if it doesn't work out. So, you know, if you go into it and you're like, oh my gosh, like, we've had such a great text back and forth. They send me the best memes, like, and you just go into it really, really excited and really expecting something. And then, you know, people are human. If it falls short, I think the bigger that drop is, the more that can kind of, again, if you're not being realistic about what to expect out of, like, a date or...
Well, you can also kind of, and this is one of the many reasons why I don't like to spend too much time just back and forth texting or on the apps. Like, I like to get that first date out of the way pretty quick on, because you can start to create this perfect, quote unquote, perfect person in your brain for this individual that, like, honestly, like, you're probably just taking what your ideal person is and, like, giving them a name that is this person that you're about to meet. And, like, that's just going to set you up for failure. But the more, in my opinion, at least for myself, like, the more time I have to be in my own head and be like, oh, well, we like all the same things, we blah, 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 like, this is what our future is going to be like. The more time I have to get ahead of myself, or what do they call it on You Up, emotionally masturbate? The more time I have to do that, the more likely I feel like I am setting myself up to get disappointed. And speaking of disappointed and the holidays, my mom just texted me, every year I decorate the tree. I miss doing it with you.
Aww, Mom.
And my brother will never decorate it with her. She forces him to set it up, and that's about it.
That's what she gets out of him?
Yeah.
That's hilarious. But yeah, no, I think to your point too, and that's kind of like maybe even a different topic, but like not giving yourself that time for the build up.
You gotta have the right amount of build up. Yeah,
like you need to be excited, but again, like, yeah, it's also really interesting because some people are really good texters and really active texters, and then you meet them in person and unfortunately they don't have social skills. This has happened to me a couple of times, but that's just something that I know is a potential outcome, being realistic.
Well, yeah, no, it's the first thing that I thought of was, remember when I was talking about that guy that was a really shitty kisser?
I mean, yes.
I mean, there have been a few, sure. But no, we were talking about it on the Nice Guys episode from last year that we just put out, I don't know, like a month ago or whatever. No, I was thinking about it with him because he was like, the banter or whatever on text was great. He was really fucking hot, but like IRL, just the chemistry was not there. And it's like, and I mean, I guess that was one-sided in the end, but I think he thought it was there, but I can't help it. I'm amazing. And
you are.
Everybody else just falls short.
Yeah, you are amazing. You're a treat. You're a great date.
I know. I would love spending time with me. I don't know why I'm still single.
I would be terrified of two of me. Can you just imagine two of me, like, or like the male me dating the male version of me?
Well, I feel like dating the like gender preference of choice version of yourself doesn't usually work out either, to just talk about experience and realism. Like, I mean, sometimes I look in the mirror and I'm like, I hate myself. Well, no, you know what I mean? Because then it's like you see these like qualities. I mean, yeah, sure. Like the banter is probably great, right? Like you make each other laugh. You drink all like the best beers. They pick the best presents for you because they know exactly what you want. But at the end of the day, like their flaws are your flaws. And do we like our own flaws? No.
Oh, and we are our own worst critics.
Exactly.
So
we're going to critique them.
Okay. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. Interesting. Yeah, I think I need like someone who's outgoing for sure, but maybe like a level below my energy and extrovertedness.
I think you need a little bit more like somebody to kind of balance a little bit.
Yeah.
But I mean, we can kind of get into that too, because I think it plays a role, like people who, have a very good idea. And when you've been around the block enough times, right, you have enough of an idea of like who you are and what you want in a partner. And sometimes you don't allow much flexibility. Mm-hmm. Right? When you're looking at people, it's like, oh, well, they check off this box and this box, but they don't check off that one. Deal breaker.
Yeah, I think too, one of the articles that we were looking at mentions like cynical people look for the negative. Mm-hmm. They like find the negative first. And I think like if you're being realistic, you know what your deal breakers are. and you know where you have some flexibility. And like, again, logical, realistic, you know those things. But rather than going into a conversation or a date trying to like see, oh, do they have any of these deal breakers? You go in, you know that you have those if they come up, but you go in looking for ways to connect.
Yeah. Well, and like, let's be honest, like there's there's reason I'm single. Like there are deal breakers probably about me that somebody else would see. So it's like, I mean, at the end of the day, nobody is perfect. And I do like just thinking about like the Marie in her like early 20s, like there was kind of this almost rom-com, even though I hate rom-coms, like a bit more of a rom-com attitude towards dating. And now that I've hit 30 and I'm still single, I feel like I've definitely learned like, well, you know what? You're not perfect either, honey.
What?
I know, weird.
That's so crazy.
So weird.
Daniela Hannah would disagree. But yeah, kind of like to what I was saying though, like, so that's like the realist way. Whereas I think like a cynical person's going to go in and they're just immediately going to be like nitpicky and looking at those negative things and being like, oh, nope. And I think people do that on the apps too.
Oh, 100%.
Like, well, nope. I went out with an accountant once and he was the worst, right? Like they'll find, I feel like someone who's cynical will find traits that might actually not be relevant and like hold on to that as a way to, I mean, I think part of it is another thing we were looking at in the article is like to protect themselves.
I mean, I think at the end of the day, like cynicism really, it does come from like this spot of like having been probably hurt so many times that now you have put up so many walls that it's actually you that ends up hurting yourself. But that's again where it's like, okay, where is the line between being like having realistic expectations and just being cynical?
I think it depends on like the person and the situation. I think from my point of view, it has more to do with that like positive approach versus negative approach. Like being realistic, you want things to go well, and being cynical, you just like have such a strong expectation that they won't, that I think you like manifest that energy too. Because I know like there are times where, especially if I'm going through just like a bout of depression or something like that, like in general I try to see myself as a positive person, but there are times where I realize I'll go through these periods where I'm like extremely negative. And that's something that's like I have to work on during those times and stuff like that. But I think in the past, like I've definitely brought that to dating before, where I show up and I'm just like, well, this is not going to go well, rather than showing up with like an open mind. And of course it doesn't go well because I'm bringing that negative energy to the table. You can manifest it. I mean, I also kind of like when it comes to mental health and like being in a more depressed state and trying to date, I think that's just really hard in general. Especially like when it comes to kind of first impressions, I do like to bring like my best self, the most realistic best self of me. Right. But like, you know, when I am in such a down state, like, let's be real, like that's probably not the best time to date, because when you're at that level of like depression, you need to focus on yourself. So like unless you're already in a relationship with somebody and you have like they're there and they want to support you, like that is not the time to meet somebody new, in my opinion. Yeah, I would agree with you. And I think it's different for different people, but I think you hit a little bit of a risk of like almost like future like codependency if you are in that state and then you do meet someone, and let's just say it's someone who's like extremely charismatic, right? So that you get that kind of like dopamine hit, and then you associate that with the person, and then it could be that you like that person kind of pulls you out temporarily of this like depressed state. So then you kind of become dependent on them. And then if things don't work out, then it's like, then you haven't worked through that state, whatever that means for you, on your own. And so you can kind of like, because I feel like this is where some people get attached really easily because they're like, oh, this person is providing this happiness for me. Rather than going through, you know, some of the work, whatever that is, and working through that.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely pinpoint some times where, like, I was not in probably the best state to be dating, and yet I went out there and did it anyways. And it's, I mean, honestly, like, it's gotten me into a very sticky situation, like, just thinking about, like, what the main thing that really comes to my mind. And it legitimately, not saying that this is always going to happen, but for me, I ended up in an abusive relationship. And so that is something that's like going to be like in the back of my mind. And then that anybody who knows the cycles of abuse too, then it's even harder to get out.
Yeah.
Now it's coupled with the fact that I was already in a low state and now I'm in a lower state. And that's, luckily I go into enough depressed states that I know how to get myself out of it eventually. So it's like I've done it before and I can do it again kind of a thing. But yeah, I mean, but that's worst case scenario, I think.
Right.
Like, I don't think everybody that goes into a date depressed is going to end up in an abusive relationship. That would be a cynical way of thinking.
That would be a cynical way of thinking, yes. And we are realists here.
Realists, not quite optimists.
Not quite
realists.
Not quite optimistic.
Sometimes I try to stay optimistic.
I'm optimistic about some things.
Some people. Sometimes.
Sometimes.
When it makes sense.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think.
Here we are lying to ourselves and all of our fans.
When was the last time that we were optimistic about something?
About dating?
Yeah. We, collectively.
Because we also date as a unit. Lindsay and I practically do. Every time she's like dating someone, it's like, hi, I'm Michelle. I will be the third to this situation here.
Welcome to the throuple.
Welcome to the throuple. I don't know. I mean, well, no, I think it still falls under like realist because I went on a date recently. Felt like I went into it pretty optimistic, but I also going into it was like, well, the person's like recently out of a relationship. Like, I'm trying to think of what like an optimistic view would be.
We need to get like a 22-year-old in here for this.
Yeah,
we'll do a follow-up on optimism versus realism.
Someone who's really excited about life.
Apparently. Wow.
We need someone who's in their 20s. Now that we're both 30.
Now that we're old.
This is a mature podcast now.
Yeah. We've really grown up since we started.
I've definitely changed my ways for sure.
Oh, totally.
Absolutely.
Same.
So maybe looking at like, so for people who are listening to this and they maybe do find themselves like, oh, maybe I am being more cynical. What do we think are ways to kind of like work on that? Because the other thing is that
therapy.
Yeah. Yeah. Find yourself an Airy. A
Gary or a Larry.
That reminds me, I need to get back on his calendar. I forgot to book an appointment.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you though. What were you saying?
Well, I'm just thinking of ways outside of therapy. We advocate for it all the time. We need to get sponsored by like BetterHelp or something.
Or Mark Schneider.
Or just
PhD. I need to, we'll talk about this later. I want to do some stuff with him when I'm at home. But yeah, if you want to virtually jump in, we can have some mini therapy sessions.
Some little sessions. But I think one thing, if you're like questioning like, oh, am I just being realistic? Or is this like, does this come off as cynicism? Because that's the other thing is like, even if you think you're being realistic, but it's coming off that way, again, not that you should ever have to be like fake or change yourself or anything, but, you know, it does affect the way that you date and that other people see you and your kind of, like, ability to be, you know, not attractive, like, hot attractive, but to, like, attract energy from people. So, like, what do you think are ways that, I don't know. I think the first thing you can do is you can, like, if you have good friends that'll be honest with you, like,
I was just going to say
ask
that.
them.
I was just going to say, like, have friends that are going to be, like, straight up and call you out. Because, like, when you were talking the other day about, like, oh, like, those red flags, I was like, okay, but you haven't gone out with him yet.
Right.
So you don't really know, like, oh, they're recently out of a relationship, as an example.
Right.
You don't really know if that's a red flag.
Right.
Until you have a conversation with them. And maybe it's not a red flag.
Right.
Maybe they checked out of the relationship a long time ago and they're totally over it.
Well, that's like I went on what I think might have been a date.
The maybe date.
A couple of weeks ago. And that was a really interesting one because he's, like, recently divorced and gone through quite a bit with it. Mm-hmm. And so, like, I just, like, brought it up and we chatted through it, and he was saying, like, he was mentioning he signed himself up for therapy, he's working through it, he mentioned some other things, and I was like, okay, this is someone who has a grasp on this. This isn't, like, this is now not necessarily a red flag, but it's, like, it's a factor to consider.
I would say there's a certain point of that where it could be a green flag, to be honest with you.
The self-awareness and working on it, for sure.
The therapy?
Yeah. Therapy is a green flag.
Therapy is a green flag for me. Like, cool. You're at least taking charge no matter how fucked up you are. Like, you are taking some control over your mental health.
Well, and especially because there's so much fucking stigma around men going to therapy. Like, it sucks. It really does, because just, like, I think people overthink too what therapy can be. Sometimes I get on with Gary and we just bullshit, and I try to ask him how he's doing and he doesn't answer me and he turns it back to me. But you know, I mean, there's different ways to approach it. You don't have to get on and, like, share your deepest, darkest secrets the first time you talk to somebody.
Yeah. I went down a whole rabbit hole with Larry once about, like, his vinyl collection, and that because I have, you know, my records too.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh yeah, he's got, like, several hundred.
Wow.
I mean, to be fair, he's been around quite a bit longer than I have been, and he was around when records were, like, the way that you listened to music. So like it makes logical sense. But, like, we just went down this rabbit hole of, like, music and, like, records and all of it, and it was dope. So it's like, you're not always sitting there, like, talking about your fucking feelings.
Yeah. Gary doesn't really let me go down those kinds of rabbit holes, but I don't know anything about his life.
He knows that you need to talk about yourself.
He knows that I'm not good at talking about myself, unless it's on a podcast.
Is this therapy?
It's one of our outlets.
True.
But yeah, no, I think, and if you don't have friends that'll be honest with you, get you some, because there are times where, like, Marie will call me out on my bullshit, and it's important. Like, it is, because sometimes we get in our own heads and we don't realize that we're doing this, or we're not being honest with ourselves, and you need your friend to be like, Marie. Like, sometimes I know she's not going to listen to me.
Oh, sure.
But she still sometimes needs to hear things from outside of her own head, even if it is the same voice.
Oh my gosh. Now, okay, so since I was binging You on Netflix all day yesterday, I cannot stop thinking about it. Also, in terms of cynicism, maybe that's part of the reason why this was in my head as a topic today.
1,000%.
But you're also just, like, it's narrated by mostly his inner monologue.
Okay.
Which is just this constant push and pull of, like, well, in the first season, you can tell that he's a little bit more like, oh, he's like jaded, but he's still, like, putting his perfect person onto this pretty girl that he sees at the bookstore,
Okay.
And then season 2 rolls around because, yes, I did watch that much yesterday. And I just started the show this week, by the way. It's a problem. But in season 2, he's got so much more of just this, like, no, you can't do that. Like, no, like be cool. Like, he's pulling himself towards this attempt at realism. Like, this, like, no, actually, like, this person isn't this whole idea that you've made up. They are this way. And actually, that way is also pretty great. Like, I actually really like the person that this actually is versus the person that I've made them out to be in my head.
Interesting.
And then he's like a serial killer too. So, that's a whole different can of worms. But
yeah. I don't know if he's, we're not like modeling our theories after him, just to be clear here. But yeah, kind of trekking back to, we like to be solution oriented here.
We're doing our best.
Like, do you want us to listen or do you want us to solve? We're solving. I think some other ways to maybe like pull, if you realize you're being cynical, it's hard. You can't just like stop, right? Because it's a mindset. It is. I think some other ways are like surrounding yourself with even sometimes like infectiously positive people can be really annoying. Yeah. But sometimes seeing the way that they approach things can be like really eye-opening. Because you're like, oh, they're so annoying. But also like they seem really happy because they just found the joy in this, this simple thing or whatever it is. And then I think too, there's a lot of books about mindset. There's a lot of podcasts that like kind of can help you find ways to work through it. But I think, I'm always going to be an advocate of being realistic and having realistic expectations. But I think looking at how you're approaching things, you might find that you're getting in your own way when it comes to dating or career progression.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, I think too, because if you're finding yourself leaning more on the side of cynicism, even though that person might annoy the living shit out of you, that's like very, very positive, spending more time either like listening to, like, consuming something on the completely other end of the spectrum, it's like you're leveling yourself out, right? You're like a teeter-totter and you're leaning towards being a bitch or a negative, and you need to flip the other way, or at least get yourself centered, re-centered. It's like, because I can obviously get more on the side of cynical, and thinking back to my GoDaddy days, when I was working under one of my managers, so one of my managers got pretty negative after a while, and that festered for me, and it did impact my performance. Sales is such a mental game. And then I switched teams and I started working under this other manager who is just a beautiful ray of sunshine. And she's like, obviously nobody's perfect, but like she projects such positive energy, even when like, the more you get to know somebody, the more you know a little bit more about what's going on in their life. Yeah. Even when things are not perfect in her life, she still manages to just radiate this like beautiful positive energy. And obviously that was a great way for me to kind of like teeter-totter back the other way. And also just, I was on her team for a while. And it was really great to also just keep me balanced. Yeah. Just throughout, like once I got back into the balance, to just keep myself there.
Yeah. I think that kind of ties into just like finding the right, people, or again, if you're not as much of like a social person, the right like motivation sources. And if it's something you're working on, like having your friends kind of keep an eye on it and be like, hey, does it seem like I'm coming across a little less cynical? But yeah, I don't know. I mean, and at the end of the day, also, fuck it. If you want to be a cynical person, then you do you.
I mean, well, that's like at the end of the day, like you can't force somebody to change their mindset at the end of the day. But also it's like, if you think about it too, when somebody does start getting so negative in their head, like, people don't always want to be around you.
Right.
So that's something also to be kind of cognizant of. Let's tie back a little bit, just in terms of maybe something constructive when it comes to being negative on the apps. And I feel like we talk about this on Shit Guys Say, like, at least every Shit Guys Say episode. But, like, I guess example wise, what are some of the things that you have seen that, like, okay, you see this person, they're super hot, they look great, and then they have that one prompt?
Yeah, so when it comes to the apps, and it's like kind of one of my biggest pet peeves, we've talked about this a lot, but whenever someone's like, oh, I hate it here, this is a waste of time, no one on here is real, like, when they're basically like prophesizing for themselves what they're going to experience, or manifesting for themselves, like, what they're going to experience, and they put that in. Even if you think that, you don't need to put that out there as your response. Like, no one truly, like, the apps are there, but no, I mean, some people maybe get off on, like, the likes and the chats and the swiping.
Well, I was going to say, I cannot think of a single person who would see something like, I hate it here, and want to match with that person. I cannot think of a single person.
Right. Well,
so, yeah, now you're just, okay, you're like, why am I not getting any matches? Well, maybe look at your profile.
Like, if you're putting that kind of energy out as your kind of gallery view of yourself, right? This is the snapshot of who you're presenting yourself as. You're probably going to be a dick to the waiter at the restaurant. You're going to try to order, you know, some bougie cocktail somewhere you shouldn't, or you're going to complain because they don't have Miller Lite somewhere. That's not a Miller Lite type of, you know, we're going to go to a craft brewery, and you're going to try to get a Corona. And be like, I'm sorry, who brought this person? He's not with me. Like,
these sound like very personal stories.
Actually, I love my dad to death, but my dad tries to get like a Corona at a craft brewery. He's done it before. He's just not a big drinker. He's nice about it though. He's not a dick.
I was gonna say, it's probably not out of cynicism at that point. It's probably just out of like lack of knowledge.
It is, but no, I just mean, like, if you have an opportunity to present yourself in a really good light, and you're putting something negative out there immediately, I'm like, no.
Well, that's all any of these profiles are, whether it's like your Facebook, your Instagram, your Hinge, your Bumble, whatever. You are choosing, like, these are the 6 photos or whatever that you've selected to present yourself as. So I would say, theoretically, most people want to project their best selves into that, like, whatever that platform is. So when you're projecting that, it's like, not only are you coming off as super negative, but it's like, holy shit, how negative is that person actually?
Right.
And, like, let's be honest, none of us like being on the apps.
Right.
Like, frankly, like, I think I've mostly resigned to just not.
I have not re-downloaded Hinge since getting my new iPhone.
I'm so proud of you. For both of those.
for
all of the above.
No one is more excited about my new iPhone than my friends. I have like 8 text messages I'm going to put into a meme.
Well, yeah, and like, I don't know, especially when it comes to like whether or not, like, I still have the apps on my phone. I'm low key just waiting for Raya to decide that I'm famous enough to allow me to create my profile. I'm still on the waiting list, and I'm bitter about it. But I mean, like, I switched my location to New York when I was out there, of course, as one does. And I realized the other day, I haven't switched it back because I haven't even looked at anybody that matched with me.
That's hilarious. But there's not really, I mean, like you've talked about, though, there's like not really, like, you're leaving in a couple months, right? And we have the holidays. Like, there's not, you know, what are you going to do? Have a 30-day relationship?
Woo! That's probably like goals for a lot of guys, right?
Yeah, like, oh, cool. I
am their perfect woman.
Yeah, actually, yeah, they get the like honeymoon phase, the fun part, and then right before things start getting serious, you're on a plane out of here.
Cuffing season. Yeah, they get to cuff, they get to settle down, they don't need to worry about the repercussions.
Exactly.
Right, but like I don't have the energy to invest in somebody else like that. But
do not slide into Marie's DMs.
She is not open.
Mine are open as always at mcraigpdx.
Well, but I mean, even without that, it's like I just like I could have gone back through and like I've said it before too, like a bitch. Like I'm on the apps mostly for content at this point. Will I probably jump back on Hinge for a little while when I first moved there? Yeah, probably to meet people. I will be their red flag of, hey, just moved to town.
Yeah, but I think I still think that's like reasonable though, right? Like, especially for people who aren't going to be like me and just go kidnap people at every like local establishment. I think the app is a good way to meet people. And again, it's like, if someone's new to town and they're transparent about it, I don't think it's, it's a red flag if I'm looking for like a serious relationship and they've been in Austin for a month. But, I think you can go out with people and be friends and whatever too.
On the other hand though too, like just because somebody is new to town doesn't necessarily mean that they're not looking for something serious.
True.
Like, to be obviously like, I don't want to get cuffed like the second I get to New York, because also how? That would be terrifying and probably very codependent in my cynicism. Is that being cynical or is that being realistic?
No, that's being realistic.
Okay, thank you.
I am now the expert.
Well, but like I would say generally like what I am looking for is something more serious. Like I'm not necessarily looking for a casual relationship in the longevity of my life right now, like where I'm at, because I'm just kind of bored of everything else that's casual, which is also a theme for me. But like, I guess the point is like, when you see something like that might come off as a red flag, right? Like new to town. Somebody who's really cynical might automatically be like, oh, this person just wants to fuck. But like that doesn't necessarily mean to be fair, if they're moving to Austin, it probably does mean they just want to fuck because it's Austin. But if you're somewhere else, it doesn't necessarily mean that, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would agree with that, because I was thinking about it in terms of Austin, because the other thing too is for people who move here who aren't from here, like Austin is a playground. There's
it's a playground for people who do live here.
No, I just mean like if you don't realize it when you first move here, like I feel like you need some months to like go out, meet people, do all of that, especially here. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like we've kind of covered the gamut here.
Yeah, what is our consensus here? I think our consensus is try to not be cynical. To summarize the episode in one sentence.
Sure. Yeah. Beautiful.
Don't be negative on dating apps or nobody's going to like you.
That's part of it. Unless maybe there are some super negative people out there that want to meet super negative people so they can be miserable together.
God, I feel sorry for them.
I feel like there must be.
Oh, there has to be. I would really hate to be a fly on the wall in their apartment, though. Part of me is curious and wants to be. The other part of me is like, oh my God.
I wouldn't like it. I'd be like, but look, here's something positive to think about.
Yeah, but like, look, the rainbows, the butterflies. Life is grand, isn't it?
You can get alcohol delivered. Like, what else do you need in life?
That is literally my mantra.
Well,
I can have alcohol delivered and I am happy.
On that note,
where can people find you, Michelle?
At mcraigpdx on Instagram.
At Marie R. Carlson everywhere. And we are at Swipe and the City everywhere on that. And thank you to everybody for listening. Stay positive.
Stay positive.